Welcome to the UGC E-PG Pathshala lecture series in computer science. In this series of lectures, we have been looking at a subject, software engineering. For today's session, I will be discussing it mostly on agile software development. If you look at some of our previous session, I was discussing about software development life cycle, where I have started saying about waterfall model, the importance of waterfall model, advantages and disadvantages. Likewise, starting from waterfall model, we would have flown through prototyping model, iterative development model and so on. And for today's session, we will start out with another different methodology of working on the software development, which is agile software development. The learning objectives of this particular session will be on to ensure the delivery of high quality systems, to provide strong management controls and to maximize the productivity. Most of the software development lifecycle models concentrate majorly on these three as their objectives. This is a simple diagram which projects with saying how an agile methodology would work. As I have told the importance of software development lifecycle, it was majorly to concentrate on starting from requirements analysis, design, code, test. I would have hinted with an abbreviation: analysis, design, code, test as ADCT principle. Here, as far as agile is concerned, we are slightly reworking, or we are slightly drifting from what we have been routinely doing with. So, traditional approaches are the approaches that we have seen until previous session, and these approaches are to be somewhat dynamic approaches. So, these dynamic approaches would majorly concentrate starting from having a brainstorming session in the beginning. So, brainstorming would ask the behavior, the opinion of the developers, and the stakeholders will also be involved. So, the customers, stakeholders and the developers, all of them are working together to collect the entire set of requirements. Then we will go for the design, deployment, quality assurance and so on. So, this particular diagram indicates majorly on the entire flow of agile development methodology. We will try to understand what this word agility would mean. So, to basically give a mention on agility, it is about to create and respond to changes. Compare it with the traditional software development lifecycle model, where, say for example, if I take waterfall model as an example, in the waterfall model, once I am done with the analysis, the role of the customer is completely gone. So, the customer may not have an idea of how this has been effectively converted into a design, how it has been coded and how it has been tested. Only after looking at a complete product, the customer will come to a conclusion that this is what is a product that I was asking for. So, there might be misconceptions on the same product that the customer was intending to get and the developer has developed. So, there should be some level of agility which should be involved, which should incorporate changes then and there. So, that is why the term of agility was mentioned here. So, the agility is basically to concentrate or to create and respond to the changes. Agility is the ability of being flexible and to create in a structured fashion. So, many a times we used to say, please do not be fast enough to create or complete the entire task. That is what John Wooden also said, be quick but do not be hurry. Now, we will discuss on the practices of the agile methodology. As we might know, every project is unique in its own sense. So, the trick is to customize an existing agile method to your project. So, every time we consume a project, the entire requirements collection itself is a tedious task, and we may have to take it very trickily that how we are about to work for that particular project. So, what are the basic things that we might require or we may have to practice during practicing in Agile are, point number one, we may have to have a very good thinking. So think in terms of either a pair programming approach. This pair programming is also known as peer programming, where the entire development or the entire process is being conceived as a teamwork, in which there will be two people who are actively involved. One person who is called a driver will be writing the code. The other person who is called a pointer or an observer or a navigator parallelly reviews at each line of code that is being typed in. So there are two people keenly involved during pair programming. Person 1 is named as driver and person 2 is named as observer or pointer or a navigator, who will be reviewing at the code what the other person is developing. So at the same time I am trying to correct the code, test the code, and how this would work is also being carried out. So pair programming helps, or it fetches out a lot of errors during the flow of coding. The second point is about energized work. The entire team should have been energized. By the way, I should work for, if say for example, for a day if I am planning to work for 8 hours, the 8 hours with how much of energy I am trying to work for that particular project is essential. So I may have to concentrate on that particular work, but then the mood of working on that particular work should not get diversed, or it should not get changed. So I may have to be energized, motivated to how I should work. The third one about thinking is on informative workspace. I may have to create a very good workspace around myself so as to keep in my mood. One of the effective methodologies of informative workspace would be keeping out lot of charts. There can be several hand drawn charts which can effectively label on different things that we may have to conceive from the simple project. As I have already mentioned, every project is unique. So the ideas of implementing to the project might vary. It will never be the same. So every time I work on the information workspace, I have to give a lot of hand drawn charts. May it be a concept map, may it be a flow diagram or so. So these hand drawn charts help us understand what should come first, followed by what. Or this hand drawn charts gives me a complete explanation of how the flow would be, or what are interconnected with what. So this gives a clear understanding in the beginning. The fourth point would be on the root cause analysis. This root cause analysis is complete variant, where many a times when we understand the entire process, although we find a problem with the process, we do mistake on the people. So we intend to blame people, and the agility, the purpose of getting into agility is not to blame the people, but then the process by itself. So root cause analysis completely looks at process, the variation and the response that we may have to produce on a process, rather than concentrating on the people by themselves. And the last point will be on the retrospectives. The second practice that we may have to understand from agility is collaborating. As I have already indicated, it is by teamwork we will bring a very good project, not by doing it individually. So whenever I am trying to collaborate as a team, trust is the first factor that should come to my mind. So whenever a work is being assigned to that particular person, say for deriving the features of a particular product, we may have to trust on that particular person. So for bringing up trust, many a times we may have to sit together and work. And it is not sitting together as developers, it is although with the customers also. So we may have to involve customers as much as possible. So real time customer involvement is also being taken care. And we may have to look out for ubiquitous languages. And we may have to intentionally create a lot of stand-up meetings, where these stand-up meetings help creating a lot of innovative ideas. Every day for at least 5 minutes, everybody will assemble on a room, create a simple features that they are about to develop for that particular day, what they have been working on the previous day, what they are planned for working on that particular day will be brought up during that stand-up meeting session. Then we will bring out a common coding standard which is mostly acceptable by my customer and also by my developer. Then I will go for a demo of the entire sprint. A sprint is something that we have been working for say 2 to 3 weeks, a 15 days to 21 days time. So whatever activities that I was working on that particular period, I will show a demo to my customer for making them very satisfactory on the product that I develop. And finally, reporting. The third point that agility gives you as a practice is the releasing. Whenever I am to release a particular product, it intentionally means I am done. So there are no bugs within the product, and I should effectively manage on the different versions. So version control also gives a keen understanding. Then there should have been a continuous integration. Sometimes we used to project our work in terms of separate chunks, say for example one module at a time. So but then as a final end product delivery, I may have to integrate all these simple modules or all the modules that I have towards the development of the project. So continuous integration leads me to a full-fledged delivery. And collective code ownership, documentation. If you look at traditional and the agile practices, during traditional approaches, documentation is being given highest importance, whereas when we are working for agility, documentation is considered, but then it is not as, the priority of this is not as compared to the traditional approaches. As a fourth practice, we may have to land up in very good planning. So for an effective planning, we require a complete vision to be prepared, release the planning, work on iterative planning. So as I have told you about the sprint, if the customer is not very satisfactory about this product that I have developed so far, then I may have to iteratively work on that so as to make the customer satisfy with what has been developed by them. And then estimating. So while we are working on the planning, we give them a complete estimate of the product. We work on the vision of the product, we release the entire plan, and we give an iterative methodology of improvising on it. So changing the versions then and there. The other thing we may have to give utmost concentration is on the developing aspect of it. Towards developing aspect, the customer used to test. It is primarily because customers are given more weightage, or customers are given on par weightage at the time of development. So customer test is also being carried out on par with the development stages. The second point that we intend to give is a test driven development. It is a software development process that relies on the repetition of very short development cycle. Here we are mentioning it as a sprint. Say for example in a scrum we would mean it as a sprint, or in a test driven development we are trying to develop in a short span. So first the developer writes automated test case that defines a desired improvement or new function, then produces the minimum amount of code to pass the test, and finally refactors the new code to acceptable standards. So initially I will tend to write a minimum amount of code as per the standards that I have defined previously. Towards the end, I will redraft on the same code so as to pass the acceptable standards. And towards the stage of developing, I will create very simple designs which is understandable by the customers. Why we are practicing it along with the customers is with the fundamental base that the product should be maintainable enough. Now that we will look on the Agile manifestos, how this has converted from a traditional approach. This Agile basically works on individuals and most of their interaction that happens among these individuals, not on process and tools that has been already available. Agile focuses more on working software rather than comprehensive documentation. This is what I am mentioning. It is mostly towards how I develop the software, what is the effectiveness of developing this particular software, how much it is working, and my concentration is not on the documentation aspect of it. The third thing is about how I can make all my customers and the developers collaborate. So customers collaboration rather than contract negotiation in terms of the documentation. And the last aspect is on responding to the change, because requirements are not the one that is to be defined at the initial stages. So once after the customer has defined the requirements, you can never start with in today's world's application. These requirements constantly change. So responding to the change plays a vital role in agility when compared to following a standard work plan from the requirement analysis that I have planned for. To effectively work on these agile practices and principles, we are defining 12 principles behind this Agile manifesto. The first principle towards Agile is our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery for valuable software. Welcome changing requirements. So as much as changes that the customer provides, that should be incorporatable. So any changes that my customer gives me, I should not hesitate in taking that. So that should be quite often be adoptable. So welcome changing requirements even late during the development phase. Agile processes harness change for the customer's competitive advantage. Third principle, deliver working software very frequently. That is in terms of Scrum during 15 days in a sprint. Deliver working software frequently from a couple of weeks to a couple of months, rather than giving the entire phase of development after integration, say for example after 6 months of time or after an years of time, where the customer might have continuously or might have forgotten what has been posted as the initial requirement phase. So deliver working software frequently from a couple of weeks to a couple of months with a preference to short time scale. Fourth principle, business people and developers must work together daily throughout the project. So there should be some person who is assigned from the customer's end. There should be some people who are assigned from the developer's end. They will be aligned together during the stand-up meetings every day, and this project is a continuous collaboration between these two people until it is getting completed. Build projects, this is principle 5, build projects around motivated individuals. So that is what I have been mentioning in the beginning. Motivation plays a vital role. The higher ups of the developers, who are supposed to be the Scrum masters in terms of a Scrum or a mentor in terms of other agile process, they are supposed to motivate the entire team on how to exactly or how to match up the pace of the customer, how to deliver effective products, give them the environment and support. So by in terms of the infrastructure, and trust them to get the job completely done in an effective manner. Principle 6, the most effective and efficient method of conveying the information to and within a development team is to have a face-to-face communication. Although I am very much comfortable working offline or individually, but then during everyday morning stand-up meeting, I'll be very comfortable to understand what my customer intends to say or how these requirements have exactly been altered or changed during the due course, so that can be adopted on my project. Principle 7, working software is a primary measure of the progress. If you look at the progress of the work, anything that is working, so I cannot say the complete documentation is over, so 50% of my job is done. It is towards the working software I estimate on the progress of the entire work. Principle 8, Agile process promote sustainable development, where the sponsors, developers and the users should be able to maintain a constant pace definitely. Principle 9, continuous attention to technical excellence and good design enhances agility. So as far as possible, customers, you cannot always expect customers to be more technically good. So whatever requirements that the customer has posted, that has to be converted with an expertise, by an expertise into a very good design. Principle 10, where the simplicity, the art of maximizing the amount of work not done is essential. Principle 11, the best architectures, requirements and designs emerge from a self-organizing team. So anybody who organizes his own team can develop very good architectures. And the last principle, as far as Agile is concerned, at regular intervals, the team reflects on how to become more effective, then tunes and adjusts its behavior accordingly. So the team's understanding and the motivation has been at a constant pace. So I may have to tune according to the customer's pace and my other colleagues' pace, and my behavior and attitude needs to be changed according to them. One of the Agile practices is on extreme programming, which is part of software development life cycle. This is developed in 90s, where it is most commonly mentioned as XP practices. These practices revolve around only 4 different principles, starting from pair programming, what as I have been mentioning, where 2 people will be involved. One is supposed to be the driver, the other one is supposed to be the observer. Then test driven development, refactoring, simple design. So once after I have done all these 4, it goes on the next phase, where I have a collective ownership, coding standard, sustainable pace, continuous integration. On the upper hand, I will be looking at customer test, whole team, planning for a game and small releases. So if I look at these concentric circles majorly focus on 4 different aspects. So with that as the base, extreme programming works. So extreme programming practices on point number 1, on-site customer, where the customer is actively involved with the development process. That is what agility also insists on. So customer basically provides all their features in terms of user stories. So if I wanted to highlight saying my account is payable only from the IP address that is assigned to that particular modem, say for example, I have taken a broadband connectivity and I can pay on my bill only from that particular modem's usage. If such is the case, the features are the IP address that is assigned to that particular modem needs to be taken. So, in that particular case, these features are said to be as user stories. These user stories are quite naturally the common things across projects. So, these user stories are short, informal stories describing several features, and this keeps on story cards. The second point that these extreme practices projects is on the planning game. So, developers and customers plan their work together. Developer gives cost estimates to stories and a budget. They can use the abstract account mechanism, later compare it with the actual cost to improve estimates over time. From the customer's perspective, customer prioritizes all the stories to fit within the budget. So, customer looks at only the features that the developer is going to provide, and he matches with the budget. The third thing that he would concentrate is on the metaphor. A metaphor basically describes on how the whole project will fit it together. So, the integration aspect of it, how this will fit together will be concentrated on the metaphor. The picture that is shown in the jigsaw puzzle will be a very good example of a metaphor. It provides a framework for discussing project in a team. It requires tools and materials that a good metaphor will adopt with. In summary, in today's session, we have started saying about agility, which is nothing but how to respond to changes in terms of requirements. Then we have talked about Agile Manifesto. When compared to the traditional approaches, how these Agile approaches would change. Then we discussed about 12 different principles that we may have to adopt while transforming ourselves to agility. And towards agility, one of the basic agile development methodologies that I have started with is on the XP practices, that is extreme programming practices. Thank you.